Hello, friends. Welcome to this recorded sermon for Sunday, January 7th, 2024. My name is Bob Malone. I'm the pastor here at Mount Vernon Presbyterian Church in Alexandria, Virginia. And on behalf of our entire congregation, welcome and Happy New Year. I hope you and those you love had a meaningful holiday season and that you have jumped into this brand new year with that light that we just celebrated burning brightly within you. This morning, our scripture lesson for the day comes from the Gospel according to Matthew, the 2nd chapter, verses 1 through 12. Take a couple of deep breaths. Try to quiet all the noisiness from the past several weeks and listen yet again for what the Spirit is saying to you. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star in the east and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea. For so it has been written by the prophet, and you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the Magi and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word, so that I also may go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen in the east, until it stopped over the place where the child was. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. Friends, this is the word of the Lord and the poetry of the faithful. Thanks be to God. Well, after living in Virginia for 24 years now, significantly longer than I have lived in any other state, I consider myself to be a Virginian. And while I know some will disagree with that, especially since 10 of those years have been spent here in Northern Virginia, and people down in places like Roanoke and Lynchburg and Winchester, southern and western parts of the state, they don't even consider Northern Virginia to be part of the state of Virginia. In spite of that, I still consider myself a Virginian. But as a former Western New Yorker, I also acknowledge that I still have a bit of what should I say, salty and spirited northern blood pulsing through my veins. Y'all know I'm still a Buffalo Bills fan, and hopefully that won't change after tonight's game down in Miami. I only eat my chicken wings with blue cheese, never ranch. And I love the snow. If it's going to be winter, and by that I mean the temperature is going to drop below 32 degrees, well then I think we might as well have snow. Skiing, sledding, ice skating, they were daily activities during the winter months when I was growing up, and I still today long for those experiences again. This northern blood I bring up this morning because it has also given me a very fond appreciation for something called wintering. A process of turning inward, if you will. Taking time to enjoy the simple pleasure of what are often quieter and more solitary days. Hours spent nesting, as some would say. This time, this wintering time, is certainly a more introverted time when we take stock and consider the state of our souls. And I like having an opportunity to do that. I think we all need an opportunity to do that. The Danes have this thing they call hygge. Perhaps you've heard of it before. It's a word that literally translated means cozy. But in Denmark, the word is often used as a verb, and that it is something you can actually do. Externally, it often involves a lot of candles, hot tea, soft music, warm socks, and, well, because it's Denmark, usually a little bit of chocolate. But internally, it's a form of mindfulness, intentionality, and a focus on one's interior life. And I love it. I love this concept of hygge, and my wife does it extremely well in our home. But whatever you call it, hygge or just wintering, such times can be extremely important moments of spiritual growth. In many ways, it's like a spiritual discipline, which is why when the opportunity to winter comes along, I am usually quick to welcome it, often anticipating it, especially in the months of January and February. But here's the thing. Here's the interesting thing about wintering. It has both a freeze and a thaw. It has some good times and maybe some not so good times. It has some light, airy moments of reflection, but also some challenging times of reflection. One is often far more uncomfortable than the other. British author Catherine May writes about this in her book, Wintering, and says that oftentimes wintering can involve a fallow period when we feel cut off from the world, rejected, sidelined, blocked from progress, or cast in the role of an outsider. Perhaps it is the result of an illness or a life event such as a bereavement or the birth of a child. Perhaps it comes from a humiliation or a failure. Or perhaps from a period of transition when you have temporarily fallen between two worlds. And May goes on. Sometimes, she says, wintering creeps up upon us slowly and appallingly suddenly. Other times, it happens more quickly. But whatever it is, and however it arrives, wintering is usually involuntary, lonely, and deeply painful. This is the freeze of our wintering. And while we can obviously have such experiences throughout the year, at any time and in any season, there is something different, I think, when these moments come in January and February, and they often do. This is when the freeze seems particularly harsh, perhaps because of the darkness of the days, or perhaps the weather. Perhaps it is because winter just is a more barren time of year, at least in the northern hemisphere. And so the freeze aspect of wintering, the hard part of these kinds of experiences, will invariably involve the acceptance of sadness. Allowing ourselves to really feel our feelings and to stare down the hardest parts of the human experience. This is the wintering that is particularly difficult, particularly challenging, especially when they come not quickly but more gradually. They slowly creep into our lives and overtake us often before we even realize that they have come. And while they are extremely hard, this freeze in our moments of wintering, they are so important for our souls. Pastor, writer, and musician Jason Bradley recently said, "Winter reminds me of the importance of dormancy. We all need a season where our production stops and our attention and energy are focused inward. Even nature itself," he says, tells us that it's unnatural to constantly produce without this essential inward work. Wintering. It's something we all experience, whether intentionally or unintentionally, and it will usually involve a freeze. And that is what makes that aspect of wintering so hard. May rightly believes that the business of wintering involves what she calls abscission. And it's a word I confess to never having heard before. She writes, abscission is the dropping of leaves by deciduous trees, which occurs between autumn and winter as part of an arc of growth, maturity, and renewal. For in the absence of sunlight, she says, it becomes too costly to maintain the machinery of growth. So the tree will gradually sever the leaf from its access to water, causing it to dry and become brown, and in most cases fall off, either under its own weight or encouraged by wintry rains and winds. Then, she goes on, within a few hours, the tree will release substances to heal the scar that the leaf has left, protecting itself from the evaporation of water, infection, or the invasion of parasites. Even as some leaves are falling, she tells us, the buds of next year's crop are already in place, waiting to erupt again in the spring. You see, wintering does have a thaw, but first comes the freeze. And that process of kind of letting go, moving into a more barren time of year, that is what is so hard. And it's what both Bradley and May are trying to share with us as being central growth moments in our lives, important times in our wintering. It's what it means to truly be part of creation. Scientists have said that our bodies are made up of almost exactly the same elements as the stars. Our bone composition matches the coral in the seas. And whether we like it or not, our lives are ruled by the moon and the sun. So we're not being lazy when we slow down in the winter months. Nature is simply pulling us into a pause, like everything else. Wintering is less about dying and more about dormancy. Let me say that again. Wintering is less about dying and more about dormancy. And we all need dormant periods in our lives. Times when we are intentional about it or forced into it. But moments when we will slow down. It's essential for every living thing. And while those times may be difficult, and while the experiences that may bring those times about are hard, we can find comfort in the knowledge that they will not last forever. Musician Toby Mac says, in the middle of pain and disappointment and suffering, I would say in the middle of the freeze of our wintering, in the middle of all of that, our faith whispers, this isn't permanent. And so the challenge is not to try to avoid these moments in our lives, whether they are intentional or whether they are forced upon us, but to rather embrace them. To perhaps even seek them out so that we might grow and mature. Because in the end, as with deciduous trees, wintering is all about growth and transformation. And that's where Epiphany enters the picture. The 2023 holiday season officially ended yesterday with Epiphany, which falls the day after the 12 days of Christmas. And for most of us, especially for those of us who have grown up in the church, Epiphany is about 3 wise men bringing gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh to the infant king. But Epiphany is also more than that. You see, Epiphany and Epiphany is a revelation. As a verb, it actually means to reveal. And the wise men, and that familiar story from Matthew chapter 2, is designed to communicate something new to us about our faith, something new to us about God. The story is about Jesus not just coming to the Jewish people, to the Hebrew people, but to the Gentile world as well, to all of us. And this revelation, this epiphany, changes everything. For God is no longer thought of or understood as only the God of one group, one tribe, one nation, one religion. God is the God of all creation, and such is the message of the Epiphany story. The birth of Jesus is not just for the lowly. It is not even just for the Hebrew people living in Bethlehem. Rather, it is for the wealthy and the wise as well. It is for all people everywhere, all around the world, and in every circumstance of life. Jesus is for us all. And just as this story, this Epiphany story, radically alters the way we think about divinity, and just as it deepens our understanding of Jesus and the incarnation, Just as it broadens our faith and our individual theology, so too does our wintering do the same. And while in our wintering, that thaw, that I will talk about more next week, will always come, wintering will invariably begin with a freeze, with cold times, with hard times, moments when sadness grips our souls and when barren and fallow days become our norm. And more, I'm coming to see how these are essentially important times in our lives, needed times, so we can't run from them. We shouldn't constantly be trying to avoid them. We cannot rush through them. Rather, we need to embrace the freeze as a starting point, because the thaw will come. But it is in the freeze that epiphany happens. This morning, may we all begin to consider what epiphany God is sending to our lives this new year. During the next couple of months, may we consider how all of us might become a little bit more intentional in our wintering, so that we might become better in tune to what God is saying to us, so that epiphanies might abound in our lives. How is the Holy One attempting to grow us? Attempting to grow you? Resist. I encourage you to resist trying to make this winter a season of doing, but rather allow it to become a season of simply being, listening, and remaining open to all the ways the Spirit is seeking to transform you. Step boldly into this season, mindful that first comes the freeze, and that with that freeze there will be sadness and grief, challenge and struggle, and a cold starkness that will force us all to deal with the reality that harsh days are at some point the experience of every living thing. But from those experiences, we will grow, we will learn, and we will experience an epiphany that comes when we give our hearts more and more to the Christ. To him be all glory and honor in our lives this day and throughout this new year. Friends, have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you right back here next Sunday morning. Until then, peace.